You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 85. Today I'll be talking to Jacub Gagnon. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Jacub Gagnon. Jacub creates gorgeously detailed paintings of animals, generally with a surreal spin. And while he doesn't depict humans in his work, their presence is definitely felt. We talk about his use of animals to communicate his ideas, how he first got into painting, what he has coming up in the new year, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Jacub Gagnon. Jacub, welcome to the show, man. It's really good to have you on. I appreciate you coming.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Love your podcast.
Awesome. So if you've listened before, you know I generally start back at the beginning. So I know that you grew up in a small country town in Ontario. Was that, I mean, and we were talking about this before, my limited knowledge of Canada geography. I know of Toronto, but was the small country town in Ontario near Toronto or somewhere close to the city?
Not really, no. We're a couple hours east of Toronto, just kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's one of those towns where you drive past it, you drive through it on the highway, but you don't really, there's no real reason to stop there unless, you need gas or to use the bathroom or something.
And what was like that area like? Was it more rural, like farm, like a lot of farmland, or what was the situation there?
Yeah, it was a mining town long ago, and actually it has the largest open pit mine in all of Canada, I believe. Oh, wow. There. So that's kind of what we had done, but the mine had closed up, and the town just kind of was a little stagnant. Yeah, there's lots of farms, and just small town. Nothing crazy or any industry there really.
Interesting. What kind of mine was it? Do you know?
Yeah, they mined like ore. I think they were hopeful for some more precious metals, as you would be if you were a miner.
I guess that's why it closed up.
Yeah. So, well, they'd hit an underground like water source. So their pit had started filling up with water. So I think they scrapped it, and yeah, there's still a mining operation going on there, but it's like silt for like shingles and stuff like that. So
interesting. And with it being like so far removed from, any big urban centers, did you spend a lot of time in nature as a kid?
Oh yeah, that's pretty much all we did. So right behind our house was just hundreds of acres of crown land. So just a giant forest, basically. And we spent a lot of time climbing trees, building forts, hitting each other with sticks, all the things that you would do, right?
Yeah. Is we brothers, sisters, or just friends, or who's the we?
Yeah. I have an older brother and an older sister. So we were pretty thick as thieves as we were younger. And, all the neighborhood kids, we would all get together and, kind of lived in the forest for our summers.
I'm picturing Lord of the Flies, sort of like
it got a little hairy at times. Yeah. My dad would lock the door in the summer, and just his philosophy was like kids should be outside in the summer. So he would lock the door, and we would just have to survive out there until mealtime or, bedtime or something, or if you had to use the bathroom, but
yeah. I mean, and this is a little off topic, but I find myself reflecting on the difference in like people upbringing today versus when I was a kid, and it sounds like when you were a kid, like just how much we were just outside and given so much infinite freedom. Like, hey, just go play outside.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you for the rest of the day.
That's right. Yeah. There wasn't as much fear around it. Right. And I think kids need that to explore. But as a parent myself, it's, sometimes it's scary to send your kids out there to do something that's a little dangerous, but I think that's how you learn. So,
yeah. What kind of work did your parents do? Anything artistic?
Nothing artistic. For the first decade of my life, my mom wasn't working. She just was a stay-at-home mom. And she was always in the school and helping out in our classes and with teachers and staff. And then after that, she was working in a nursing home in the kitchen. And then she had another role as a care worker. So not artistic per se. And my father was a general laborer for the first part of my life, and then he went into computer repair. So he was kind of like the town computer guy.
Nice. IT department.
Yeah, like old school. I remember we had his computer room at the time was like, we had like motherboards hanging on the wall, and like
nice.
It was awesome.
So did you have much opportunity to be exposed to the arts as a kid? Is it something that your parents kind of fostered in that environment?
Not particularly. There was no art gallery, no anything like that. There's only 1,200 people in our town, really small. Maybe on a rare occasion there might have been like an art in the park or something where it was, some still lifes that you might see, some watercolor still lifes, but no real exposure to the art world or galleries at that time in my life.
So how did you get that bug? How did you become interested in making art yourself? Was it something you took to at a young age, or did it come later in life?
Definitely at a young age. I always loved drawing. Probably my brother was, he used to draw a lot, and I thought he was quite good. And we would draw lots of comic book stuff, X-Men characters and stuff like that, stuff from video games and TV shows. And I really enjoyed it. So that was kind of like my activity in my spare time, is I would just draw all the time.
Oh, interesting. But what I read, you didn't want to be an artist originally. I think I had read that you wanted to be a landscape architect, which I'm not even sure what that exactly is.
I'm not sure either.
Tell me about that. It sounds like art wasn't really you had it as a side thing, but not necessarily your primary career goal.
Right. Yeah. So so art was kind of the thing that I did in my spare time. And, school projects that involved art or poster making or anything. I love that. I would say that even my peers at that age would kind of know, oh, Jacob's the drawer guy. He's the guy that you go to if you want something to look nice, or, a poster or something like that. So, that was kind of my passion, what I would do. And then the landscaping thing kind of came, I would say, just before high school. I was doing a lot of volunteering, and I was doing a lot of gardening and landscape stuff. Our main park in our town, they were completely rehauling it. And just one summer, I just volunteered almost every day. I was down there helping, move rocks and put up the picnic benches and all that kind of stuff. And that's what kind of got me into the design of, landscaping and stuff like that.
Nice.
So
how did that shift? How did your interest shift from, the landscape design, landscape architecture work to becoming an artist? Actually having that be, more than just a hobby or a side thing.
Right. Well, I guess it started, so in middle school, I had this art teacher that was just wonderful, just amazing, really inspired us. And just, I looked at him, I looked up to him, and I just thought like, wow, like I'd love to do what he does. I'd love to be an art teacher, and just his job just seemed like the ideal job, right? You get to hang out with a bunch of kids, you get to have fun with them, you get to, draw with them. It just sounded like a blast to me, but it didn't seem like, at the beginning, it didn't seem like a practical thing. So the landscape architecture seemed like a practical practical way to make some money. It wasn't until the end of high school where everyone kind of has this like mandatory meeting with the guidance counselor about, what are you going to do after high school? How are you going to apply to colleges, universities? And I was all prepared to go into this landscape architecture program. And she showed me this pamphlet for OCAD. And I'd never even heard of OCAD at that point. I didn't even really know that art schools existed. I was thinking about teaching, but I didn't know there was an actual art school. So I saw the pamphlet, and the next day I applied, and I got in, and I just kind of forgot about everything else. It was really strange.
It's amazing. It's so quick. Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole life changed in that moment. That's crazy.
Yeah. I think it just really excited me, and then I just couldn't think about anything else.
And so teaching was like your initial gateway, I guess, into the art world and wanting to be art adjacent, I guess, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I didn't, and so similarly, this is just how naive I was at the time. It didn't occur to me to go to art school to be an artist. I wanted to be an art teacher. And I was like, oh, I want to be an art teacher. My guidance counselor was like, well, you need to go to this art school and you can be an art teacher. So I was like, yes, I'm going to go to this art school, and I'm going to complete it, and I'm going to be an art teacher. That was the plan.
Nice. And so you said that you originally didn't think that was practical, and that landscape architecture was a more practical pursuit. Do you feel like that was a perception that had formed because like your limited exposure to the art world? Like you just didn't know that was a function that could exist in society?
Yeah. I didn't know any artists. I didn't know anyone that at that point, my only exposure to the art world was like the Art Gallery of Ontario, and Renaissance art, and, it was kind of a thing of the past, really.
Right. People that were all dead.
Yeah. Nobody's, and the only people I knew that were alive and doing art were doing it as just this hobby, this pastime. Right.
Were your parents supportive of that sudden shift of focus? Like, did they encourage that in you?
They did, maybe too much. They were for sure. My parents have, like anything I've kind of wanted to do, they've just been supportive of. And I think they were in part excited that I was going to university, which sounded pretty prestigious to them. Nice. And they're like, yes, you go and, have this experience and you'll get this job after. And at the time I thought I wanted to be an art teacher. So I'm sure they thought, wonderful.
While you were at school, was it then that you started shifting again? I mean, not as much, but, shifting from wanting to teach to actually wanting to create art yourself?
Near the end of my time at OCAD in my final year, again, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I go into teaching from here? And I spoke to one of the guidance counselors there for the first time in 4 years of attending. And he was like, oh, you want to teach high school art? Well, you need a second teachable. And I was like, what? Again, kind of thrown for a loop. This is totally me, unprepared, wasn't thinking about it, just kind of coasting through art school.
Went through 4 years of college and then find out on the last day.
Exactly. That was almost exactly what happened. And then I'm planning it and I'm like, oh, well, now I'm going to have to come back for a semester and pick up these English classes. And then I have to apply for, teacher's college. And it was just a whole bunch of things that I wasn't really prepared for some reason, hadn't thought about. It's totally me. not thinking ahead like that. Just ask my wife. So, yeah, I kind of put myself in that situation, and I had graduated, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to, oh, yeah, you know what? There was one other shift there that I skipped over. In my second or fourth year of OCAD, I went to school with Sarah Jonkus,
nice.
who you might know. She shows at ThinkSpace too.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to her work, and that was my first taste of somebody, like seeing somebody that was like a working artist that kind of was young like me and was showing in galleries around the world. And it just blew my mind.
Nice.
And that was kind of like the shift where I was like, wow, like maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do what she's doing.
Amazing. So thank you, Sarah, just for that inspiration.
Yeah. And she, I don't know if she knows that, but yeah, I feel like I owe a lot of that to her. Like,
that's amazing.
She just, she was painting these, she would come into class, and her projects, like we would have a project, we'd come back in a few weeks and like present our painting, and her paintings were actually, she was working on a show for ThinkSpace.
Wow.
And her project at the time was just like her work for her solo show. So she was just bringing in her paintings.
Holy cow. Yeah, her work is so good. I didn't realize she had gotten started so young, like in her career.
Yeah, I think she started pretty young, like in her, I don't know if it was her second year at OCAD or what, but she was already showing in galleries.
And so that inspired you to like actually take your creative like output seriously.
Yeah, at that point, I couldn't name a single gallery that was showing the type of work that I like to do. Like I was painting these surrealist paintings, and they just didn't really fit anywhere. And then after I saw Sarah's work, and I just typed in ThinkSpace, and this whole art scene on the West Coast just like opened up to me. And I just started seeing all of these galleries that were showing work that I was just like, this is the work that I want to make. And this is where my work fits in. Nice.
That's awesome. And I also read that while you were at school that you studied abroad for a bit, I think in Florence, which is interesting. My sister also did a study abroad thing, but in Venice, Italy. So like not terribly far. But tell me about that experience. What was that experience like going to Italy and spending, what was it, a semester there, a year there? How long were you there?
Yeah, I spent a year there. Oh, it's amazing. I have so many memories from my time there. My third year, I applied to go over there, and essentially it was just kind of like a thesis year. Like you would come up with a project, and you would kind of pitch what you wanted to do, and then you would just spend both semesters working towards it. So when we went over there, the school had a large building that they would rent every year, and it had a whole bunch of rooms in it. And I think there was about 20 of us, and we just kind of picked our little corner to have our studio and set up, and we would just work on our art, and then we would just travel around. We had an art teacher over there, and he would just take us to all of the hidden gems, all of the little art galleries, all the pastry shops. Like he just knew everybody, and he would just take us to all the places. It was just wild. It was so cool.
That's awesome. What do you feel like you took away from that experience, and like as far as like applying it to your ultimately your practice?
That was the first time in my art career that I had been given like full reign to work on whatever I wanted. So in the first 2 years at OCAD, there was always projects, and they always kind of had like, a direction that they were going. And this was the first time where I felt like I could just paint whatever I wanted. And I just had all this, I was just in the perfect place for it too.
Nice.
Because there's the influences and like everything that was around me, it felt a little magical. So I just got lost in my own world painting my weird surrealist paintings. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you graduated, got your BFA in 2009. I guess, how do you feel about your time at school? Like, did it help you grow in the ways that you needed?
I would say, and that's kind of the tricky question. I think the greatest benefit, the thing that I took away from from my art education was really, it gave me this time in my life, these 4 years, where I just focused on my art and I just focused on getting better. I put a lot of time and hours into practicing my skill and kind of learning how to do some different techniques and just really the time to practice. As for like, I didn't really have a close connection with any of my professors. You know, sometimes I felt like the instruction that you got was not really great instruction. I don't know. Lots of people have different art school experiences, but for me, like a lot of it was almost like your stereotypical like art school, like people are like, I don't know how you would see it, maybe on The Simpsons or something, the art kid that wears a beret and is just like, and they're talking about art in a way that sounds like really like metaphysical or something. Right. There was a lot of that there. And sometimes I was like, can we just cut the bullshit and talk about, the art and how good it is, because sometimes somebody would work on something the night before the project was due and they would just talk out of their ass, pardon my French. And the teacher would just fall in love with it and they get this amazing mark. And here I was all week, just, nose to the paper, drawing like crazy. And I wouldn't do as good,
So, I mean, it sounds like, middling, I guess, experience, but it did also like give you the venue to discover like art as a practice. It sounds like, because you were originally going in for a teaching career, like you could have come out the other side as a teacher, but instead you got inspired to actually become a creative yourself. So even though maybe there was nothing specific about your instruction that gave you that, like changed your mind in that way, it provided the space to do that, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't be an artist if I hadn't gone to art school, probably. So yeah, you got to give it that.
Right. So after graduating, I mean, you wasted like no time at all. It seems like, according to your CV, that you started showing right after you graduated. And I think you started really heavily showing in Toronto in 2009, the same year that you graduated. So were you doing like any other kinds of work to pay the bills while you were getting your start, or did you just entirely focus on your art practice after you got out of school?
No, at the time I basically moved back home, and I said to myself, like, I'm going to spend the summer working on nothing but my art and see what I can do with it. So at the very start of the summer, I'd done I guess at the end of my time at OCAD, we had a big show, and I'd done some paintings for it and sold them at the show. And I'd sent Andrew Hosner an email there at ThinkSpace, and I said, this is what I've been working on the past few months, and he said, I really like it, and send me some more when you have it. So I just spent the summer working on art and thought, okay, I'm just gonna do the best that I can do, and I'm gonna send him an email and kind of put all my chips in that. And in the meantime, I had found like a outdoor art show where I had applied, and I was like, okay, well, I'll put my paintings in that and see how that goes. And I'll send the pictures over to ThinkSpace and see what happens. So sold some paintings in that show, which went over well. And Andrew said, yeah, I like your work. Why don't you send me a couple pieces for a group show? And that's kind of where it started.
Nice. I mean, right out of the gate, just wasting no time. What, were there not, I mean, I guess going straight to the US market, straight to ThinkSpace, were there not that many opportunities, or did you feel that there weren't that many opportunities in Toronto to show your work? Or is the art scene there just different from what you were looking for?
Yeah, I even still, I haven't quite found, the art scene here around where I live in Toronto or London, like that shows the type of work that where I fit in. So when I discovered the West Coast art scene there, that had just clicked for me. Everything kind of, I knew that my work had fit in there, and I looked here, and everything here was a little bit more abstract and contemporary, I would say. Less, I can't name a single gallery that was showing surreal work here where I felt like my work had fit in. So I know there are a couple smaller venues now that do that, but even still, like my work, there's no home for it here.
Mm. While you were in Toronto, and I know you're not there now, but while you were there, were you trying to be active in the art scene? Like, were you going to gallery openings and trying to be, just show up for the community there?
Yeah, I was. I would go out with my buddies, and we would hit up some gallery openings and stuff like that. And I never made any connections though with any gallerist. Just artists. Again, like not my scene, not my type of work that I showed, but I've kind of lived my art career online almost, which is it's so strange.
Strange. I mean, yeah, I guess, and it's easy to say strange, but I think it's like that's just the way things are becoming. I mean, like everything is so distributed across the world. Like it's almost impossible to not have an online conduit or a large presence online in the 2023 art world.
It's true. And there's like a little difference, right? Because there are like social media artists. And
sure. Yeah.
Which is
that's
right.
That's not
like
what I'm
there
talking
are online
about.
artists. Yeah. No. But yeah, it would be nice to have a bit more of that art culture here where I live, and just to kind of like immerse yourself into it a bit more.
You said you did make connections with like artists in the area. Did you find that those artists were also showing in other parts of the world, or did they have, I guess, more of a connection with the local community?
Yeah, I would say that quite a few of the artists that I know that kind of like are in Toronto or around, like, show their work elsewhere. A lot of it in the States. And the artists that I do know that show their work here, like, I don't know, I haven't seen any like huge successful openings or shows, I don't know.
Interesting. I wonder what that is. And I wonder if the people in Toronto are buying stuff from US galleries, like the people that are interested in this kind of work. Like, it's an untapped market, it sounds like.
You know what? There's probably Toronto artists that are just like shaking their head and scoffing at this. And sure. I can't speak too much to it because, I haven't been in Toronto now for 8 or 9 years. I've been living in London. Right. It's disconnected enough. There's definitely a healthy Toronto art scene. I'm just not sure I fit into it.
Right on. And so it looks like that, you showed in several group shows. You talked about, Andrew inviting you to several of the group shows early on in 2010, 2011. And then it looks like you had your first US solo in 2012, More Human Than Human, which, by the way, great White Zombie song. If that's what, I mean, I'm assuming that's what it
totally is. Yeah.
How did that show ultimately come together, and like you graduate from doing group shows with Andrew to doing, your own solo?
I think he thought that I was ready to just do a larger body of work, and he'd kind of talked me into the idea of doing a larger body of work is really nice because you get to just focus. For me, it was kind of like making my entrance into the art world. It felt like, at first you're just dipping your toes and nobody really knows who you are. They just might see like the odd picture or something, but having a solo show really kind of introduces yourself and kind of starts you off, lets people know your brand, right? So I think that was kind of my time to do that, I think.
And how did that, I guess, was that something that you kind of said, hey, Andrew, I'm ready to do a show, or did he reach out to you and say, hey, I'd like to do a show with you? Or like, how did that just manifest?
I was pretty eager at the time. So I would just write him and just be like, hey, do you have any, I still do this. I just feel like, hey, like, what's going on? What do you have? Or, do you have any group shows or what can we do? And then he had offered me the solo show, and I was like, great. Yeah, done. At the time I was taking everything that came at me. So if somebody had offered me a show, I was just all over it.
With those early shows, were you already working in the style that you do today, or were you still kind of figuring out your artistic voice in the first few years of your career?
I would say it was definitely a little different. My work has been the same in the sense of I've always painted animals, and at the time, my work was really, I would say, very like concept based. Like I had to come up with this perfect idea, and I had to kind of like find a way to make it make sense, or try to translate it through my painting. So I'd come up with this idea of doing the string theory, how everything was kind of like connected. And that's kind of what I had started with, even in my OCAD days. And I just had carried that for a long time until it kind of felt like a bit of that string kind of felt like a bit like a noose, where I couldn't think of ideas or things outside of that. So I think a lot of artists kind of do that. They start somewhere, and then, I mean, that's how you evolve, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it roped you into a box or whatever. So, I mean, that's cool that you kind of discovered that, hey, I want to, kind of loose these constraints and explore more ideas. You mentioned animals, and obviously that's a big central focus for you. Are these either early on when you were first starting out with the string theory idea, or now, are they meant to be characters in like a story that you're telling? Is it allegorical in a way? Like, do they represent something more than the animals that they appear to be?
That's a really great question. I would say that over time, things have definitely changed. In the beginning, I would say at times there are ideas within the paintings or ideas that I had. I definitely have stories that kind of go on in my head about what's happening or what this animal's doing. All of my paintings, what I try to do with my work is I try to create something different with each piece. I'm not trying to tell the same story. I'm not trying to use this, I'm not trying to tell the same story. I'm not trying to use a lot like the same characters all the time. The ideas are always different, and the angle that I approach a piece from is often different. So sometimes there's some deeper meaning, maybe something prophetic, or other times it's just silly and fun for the point of being silly and fun. So there is meaning, and then there isn't meaning, and or there's greater meaning and lesser meaning, I should say. There's always meaning, but. Mm-hmm.
And in addition to the animals, there's a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times there's, human objects. I'll call them human objects, but just objects that are markers of humanity. So while humans themselves aren't depicted, there is like a human presence, so to speak. How does that, or I guess, what does that represent in the context of the animals usually? Does it mean something in relation to the animals that they're with?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I do love that sense of there's kind of like an eeriness to that. I feel there's a show that my kids watch, and it's similar. There's these weird creatures and characters, and they're clearly living in a human world, but you never ever see humans, and there's something unsettling and kind of strange and curious about that. And I do love that idea. So in the beginning, I will say I gravitated towards animals because I really don't enjoy painting people. So I kind of stay away from people, but it's hard to translate some of the ideas or the ideas that I have without using things that people have made, right? So the worlds are created within kind of like our world. There's this human touch to it. There's man-made things, but there's no people. It's just a world of creatures and animals.
Yeah. Having such a strong focus on animals, it makes me think that, you have a love for the natural world. And I think anybody that focuses so much on nature and animals in their work must have a love of the natural world. I mean, I can't imagine spending that much time without that being there. So how do you feel about the state of the natural world right now? I mean, it's a big question with climate change and deforestation. And are you hopeful? Are you depressed? How does the current state of the world, how do you feel about that?
I mean, little column A, little column B there. It's hard not to be depressed at times, right? When you like read about a species of animals that's just on the brink of extinction, or when you read like, 500,000 creatures have been extinct in the past decade, it's hard not to be a little depressed about that. But I'm always hopeful. I think it's our job to be hopeful beings, because it's our job to make change, and you can't make change unless you have some hope, right? So it's sad days sometimes, but I think that, originally when I started painting animals, I'd kind of used them in this like playful, funny way just to have fun. And then there was a time in my painting career where I was like, I could say something with this painting, and I can, raise some sort of alarm or awareness to something that's happening in the natural world. So there was a time where that was my focus with my art.
Do you still feel that way? I mean, do you still feel like your art or do you want your art to be used in a way to, at times, maybe not always, but at times to, I guess, raise awareness? Or has your focus shifted and maybe it's less about the message and more about, other ideas?
I think, I don't feel like it's my calling in life to, like inform the world about all the endangered animals, right, and to save them. It's not my job. I think that will always be a part of my work, and it's something that is meaningful to me and something that I like to do. But at the same time, it's not something I can do all the time. I think,
right.
I think that's a trap. I think you could fall into doing that and you just couldn't find your way out of it. And like I said with my work, like, I'm not a depressive person. I'm a hopeful person, and my work sometimes, if it wasn't just playful and fun for the sake of being playful and fun, then I would lose the love to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another way to raise awareness is just showing the beauty of the natural world, and that
exactly
being the message, right? So, like, because you're showing people what you don't want to miss. Like, you don't want them to miss these things.
There's more than one way to do the job, right? And if sometimes I think about Greenpeace always gets me, because everything that they put out is always this doomsday, the world is ending, the natural world is being destroyed, and I think that's an important message, and there's an impact to that. But when your angle is always doom and gloom, when that's what you're putting out there, like,
yeah,
at some point people are gonna turn their ears off to it.
Yeah, that's true. You can reach people in different ways, or some people resonate with different ideas more. I tend to be more of like, you have the carrot and the stick approach. You can scare people with fear and uncertainty, doubt, and reach a certain segment of the population that way. But another way to reach people is show them how beautiful nature is and show them the beauty of what they're potentially missing out on, or will eventually
100%. 100%. Yeah. I'm with you there.
So another large, I guess, component of your work is the fact that you generally don't have backgrounds. So, you have this kind of spotlighting of a central subject or subjects. And whether it's black in the back or white in the back, there's still just the common aesthetic of not having a background at all. How did that motif start? Has that always been a characteristic of your work? Or is it something that you developed, as you were identifying your artistic voice?
It's something that I definitely developed. I mentioned earlier that originally I was working on these kind of like weird surrealist pieces. Actually, maybe you can see right behind me there that.
Oh, yeah.
That painting.
The crane.
Yeah, that is like a really old painting. So I used to paint these very like traditional surrealist paintings, landscapes, right? And then I would fill them full of things. At some point, I would have an idea. The idea was the only thing in my head. So I would start to draw it and put it down on paper. And then I would think like, oh, well, like, how am I going to fill up the rest of this piece? And it kind of clued into me that it wasn't really important, that filling the background was didn't really add anything for me to the story or to what I was trying to say. So to just put a background in for the sake of putting a background in seemed like a lot of time that I didn't need to spend. And there's that part too, but it just didn't add anything. So I would just start by painting my ideas, and then I kind of got into this groove. I kind of liked it.
Do you feel so not adding anything is one like level, but do you feel like it could have potentially distracted from? So not only not add a thing, but take away from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely part of it too, I think.
Interesting. So in addition to the symbolic importance of the animals that you use and the human artifacts, I guess, like, are there common symbols that you have used throughout the course of your career to mean certain things, and use those same things over and over to kind of represent an idea or a feeling?
Not symbols. No, I don't think so. That's one thing I've always tried to do with my art, is I've tried to make each piece and each painting some sort of unique idea. I know there are a lot of artists that kind of will paint like one subject matter over and over and over and over again, or focus on a detail like that, or symbols. And for me, it's just more interesting to create something new each time. So no, there aren't any symbols or anything like that I've kind of repeated over time to kind of, things I've tried to say or tie together. Not in that way. No.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like not tying things together across the span of your career. When you're talking about like a single body of work, like a solo show, do you try to inject an overarching theme into that single body of work and tie pieces together throughout that show?
Once before, I had done a show where I tried to similarly like tie things in like that, and it felt like I was constricted a little bit. So since then, I have, funny enough, for my solo shows, no, I don't normally have like a theme that kind of pulls everything together. I just put the collection of my ideas together on their own, and they're similar. My style and my work is similar enough that they all work together. But there's never usually like an overarching theme. I do have some ideas for solo shows that I've never put together where I could do that, but I've never taken the plunge and done that before.
Have you not taken that plunge because it's not interesting to you, or that it's just not kind of what you wanting to do with it? Or are you afraid it won't resonate with people? Like, what was the, I guess, because you had these ideas, but why haven't you like moved on them, I guess?
I would say, I think you just said it there. It's really hit or miss with people sometimes, right? So I had thought of this one idea for a painting, and I just was like, oh, this is a great idea. Like, I think people would love to have this on their walls. And sure enough, that painting just sat unsold for the longest time, and it just didn't sell. And I was like, oh, I had a whole show planned around that idea. So just scrapped that. And I think, yeah, that's like quicksand. I think you can, I think it could work out really well, or it could bomb.
I've never really thought about it that way. Just the fact that if you're kind of focusing a show around a single idea and that idea doesn't land, then that entire show is now compromised in a way, right? Yeah. Whereas if you have a show that's comprised of a diversity of ideas, then maybe one of those ideas doesn't land, the rest of them do, then it's not an entire loss. So it's a risk, I guess, is what
Yes, exactly. And I find those, I think the more success people have are with the broader theme ideas, right? Like if you're doing like, What's an example? Like Greg Simpkins doing like a dream world. You can put anything into dream world. It's very broad, and I think you're gonna have more success reaching different people with different pieces rather than something very specific.
No, that's a great example. So how do you generally arrive at your ideas for new individual pieces? Do you have any kind of brainstorming activities, like where you're developing those ideas, daily sketch routines, stuff like that?
No daily routines. Ideas kind of come, they're random and kind of come all over the place. So I can spend a day sitting in my studio with my sketchbook and come up with nothing. Or I could be making dinner and something pops into my head. It's really kind of strange. I think sometimes the harder you force it is actually the harder it is to come up with something that you really like. So ideas are, I try to put myself when I'm coming up with a show or a solo show or something, I will usually have a bunch of ideas kind of random throughout my sketchbook. And I find that's a good activity, is to go through my old books. And I'll often find little pieces of the puzzle that I will have forgotten about that I can, breathe new life into.
So when you have these eureka kind of moments and have thought of a new idea, is that how you capture it? Is you run to your sketchbook real quick and start sketching it down?
Oh, yes. So normally what I do is it hits me at like the worst times. Like somebody will say something in conversation and I'm like, oh, I could do something with that. And usually I'm typing it into my notes on my phone. So if you go through the notes on my phone, I have hundreds of little new notes started, and they'll just be like a few random words or ideas. And they're pretty abstract, but as soon as I have that idea in my mind, it just sticks in my mind. And then when I'm ready to get into the studio and start drawing it or fleshing it out, like it's right there.
Nice. And from there, how do you develop that composition further? Do you have like gradually more and more refined sketches and then jump into the painting, or do you just jump right into painting?
So I would say this has kind of like evolved over time. And I think with all artists, they kind of go through this. As you've been doing it for more years, you get more comfortable with your own skill. When I originally started working, I was very focused on images and finding like these perfect images online that you might have to pay royalties to use or something like that, but very specific images. And now when I know, like, let's say I want to paint a fox or a bear, I will just like look at a compilation of hundreds of photos and I will just draw from that and kind of like Frankenstein them, my idea from different photos to get different angles kind of things. I think that's pretty common for a lot of artists.
Interesting. So in addition to photo reference, are there other types of research that you do just to explore the idea?
Yeah, I always kind of try to do like a deep dive, especially a lot of my ideas, not just around animals, or like if I have like a theme or something like that, I try to do a little bit of research and reading to kind of understand where I want to take it or the angle I'm trying to come at it from. And then at that point, I do a number of sketches. And then often I will do some drawing on my computer. Very like rough kind of drawing and sketching. And that's kind of like where I do my layouts and try to figure out where everything's going to go and how I'm going to piece it together.
Okay, interesting. So at the point where you actually start painting, is everything pretty locked down and figured out at that point, or does it evolve, even further?
No, I usually don't start a piece until... And this is where I would love to loosen up a little bit. But yeah, usually I have my idea perfectly laid out and set, and I don't even start a piece until I'm pretty happy with the idea, and I'm pretty happy with how, I have my idea for the visual and how it's going to look. And I don't often make a lot of changes on top of that. At one point I would make there was no changes to that. And now I've loosened up a little bit, and now I can add things to it. But usually I've a pretty clear idea where I'm headed and what I'm going to do.
Do you like to work on a variety of pieces at the same time, or do you generally concentrate on one entirely until that's done and then move on to the next?
If I'm working on something like a solo show, I will often have like 7 or 8 paintings that are on the go.
Oh, wow.
I'll come up with the idea, and usually what happens is I get really excited about a new idea and I want to just start it right away. So it doesn't matter what I'm working on. It doesn't really matter what I'm working on. I just start the new idea. And in my mind, I know I take a lot of time to complete a painting. So for me, it's actually scarier to do them one at a time and complete them one at a time, because then I would have maybe like 2 months left of a show and I might have like 3 paintings done. And that to me is really scary. So if I start like 8 paintings and then I know like, okay, well, I just, chip away a little bit at a time, that feels more comfortable for me.
It's interesting though, like spreading that dopamine hit across multiple pieces, and gradually kind of working away at them is interesting. Difference between that and just knocking one out, finishing it up, getting that rush
Yes.
of that feeling of accomplishment and then moving to the next one.
Right. Well, the most fun part is kind of like roughing it in for me. Like that's like the fun part. The small details sometimes become tedious. Or maybe there's something that I want to paint and I just don't know how to do it. And that's where I will like shelf that painting and then start on another one until I can figure out how to actually paint what I want to paint. So that's sometimes it's challenging.
You pretty much work in your painted works exclusively in acrylic. What is it about acrylic that just as a medium that you like, opposed to oil or gouache or something else?
So I tried oil painting once in university, and it didn't go very well. We were painting. I was painting a hand, and because of the style that I paint, I often will use one brush. And I'll just use that brush for everything. I'll just keep painting all the things with it. And then in an oil painting, when you want to switch colors and stuff, you can't just like muddy them and mix the same color. So I was painting this hand, and it started off with this really nice flesh tone. And then as each finger went on, it was just getting more and more brown. So I had this it looked like makeup swatches for different skin tones.
Nice.
As my hand went on. Anyway, so acrylic, I would say, is just that it just works for my style of using like one brush and painting a lot with it. And also time is like the big one. If I was using oil, none of my paintings would make it to their shows unless I completely overhauled how I do things, and that's not going to happen.
Right. Are there other mediums that you're curious about, that you'd like to explore someday that maybe you haven't had a chance to?
Yeah. Well, funny, we're talking about oil painting. I would actually really love to do oil painting. Oh, okay. Just to,
just in limited amounts.
Right. Yes. I'd rather do it, not for my shows, but almost as a hobby, and learn how to oil paint. So that's one of the things I would love to do. And a couple of my pieces I've wanted to turn into some sort of like sculpture. So that
Nice.
kind of like interests me. So I've done a little bit of research about how to make some like kind of like vinyl toys and sculptural pieces like that. So that could be a future thing that I might dabble in a little bit. Awesome.
Very cool. So I guess, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but looking back throughout the course of your career, how do you feel that your practice or just your artwork itself has evolved, over that time? Like whether it be the methods that you work in or just the themes of the overall style. We talked a little bit more about just detaching yourself from the constraints of a single idea like the string theory. But yeah, has your practice and the way of working evolved throughout the course of your career?
Yeah, definitely. I think where a lot of people start getting into art, I think we all kind of start at the same place, as is we all start by like copying things that we see, right? At a young age, you have a cartoon character and you start drawing that cartoon character. Well, even before that, it starts with tracing, right? You trace and then you kind of evolve over time. And I've really noticed that with my own work is, when I started this kind of like surrealist journey, like I was just so in love with Salvador Dali and his paintings that I wanted my paintings to look like his. And now I can say with my work, like my work looks like my work. So there were times where you're influenced by other artists, or you see something and there's something about it that's magical or special or that you really like and you want it to be yours. But now I feel like my work it's mine. I feel like I've developed my own style and kind of my own way of doing things, and it's uniquely mine. So I'm proud of that, and excited that I have that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a critical kind of time in a person's career where they move beyond their influences and develop their own voice. Do you have any like advice to young artists who may be in the earlier stages of their career and still, kind of working in the constraints of their inspirations that need to find or need to kind of give themselves the freedom to discover their own creative voice? No pressure.
Yeah, no. I think just to speak to that, like I think we all start there. So I think it's really hard to find your own voice, and especially with social media and all the things coming at you now, like it's really easy to latch on to what somebody else is doing, I think, and try to like kind of copy that. And I think your way through that is to just keep working and keep practicing. And I think that eventually, people will have things that they want to say or their own ideas that they want to draw. I think that's it, is you just expressing your own ideas, and it's really hard to do that when you have all of these images and all these artists and all these, things that you love coming at you, because you want to do what they're doing. But you have to do it in your own way, and you have to have your own ideas and voice. And I think a lot of artists come out and they want to make their masterpiece, or they want to, just start. They say, "Oh, I want to do this. I want to do this style." And I just think it just takes time and practice to get where into a good place. So I would just say to just keep at it and keep practicing and keep really thinking about your own themes and ideas. I think that's important.
Yeah, great advice. So let's talk about what you have coming up. What's been your main focus lately, and what does 2024 look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. The past like couple of years have been like a little bit of a roller coaster because, I have a young family. So I have 3 kids now. That's definitely changed how I've worked. Before then, I would just work day and night and, get focused on shows. And now I have a lot of considerations. So yeah. Lately, I've been doing a few more just group shows. And I curated my first show at Gallery 1988 recently, which I was pretty excited to do. It was a really fun experience. I'd love to maybe dabble a little bit more into that in the next couple of years. But yeah, upcoming, I just have a few little group shows planned through 2024. I have some new prints that are coming out soon that I've just actually got back from the printer. So I'm going to be organizing some runs of those. And also I'm planning to do a few more just kind of, I have a couple projects that I like to tackle on my own that I'll probably just be selling through my own shop. So it won't be in galleries. Yeah. So focusing on a few more things like that.
When you say projects, are those paintings or some other form?
Yeah, paintings. Yeah. No, I have some kind of like some ideas of a couple themes that I'd like to do. So I'm going to test the waters and just do some like preliminary paintings and sketches, and I'll be tossing those out and see what people think of them. And maybe it will take off a little bit and maybe it won't. So
awesome. Very cool. With the group shows coming up, are what galleries are they with?
Yeah, so the first group show that I have coming up is with ThinkSpace there. Ken Fluellen invited me to his Nerdstalgia show, which I'm pretty excited about. Just with that Gallery 1988 show that I'd organized, I'd kind of transferred my love of video games into my art. So getting to be in Ken's nerd show is kind of exciting for me. It's getting to work on art that's kind of outside of my regular gallery work. So yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, just I think the group shows that I have planned are just with ThinkSpace right now. So
awesome. You mentioned wanting to move a little bit more into curating. Do you have anything on that side of things lined up, or is it just something that you want to try to explore?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything lined up. I just really had fun doing it. I know it can be a headache trying to gather all these artists and stay on track of everyone and put it all together and do the advertising and some. But there was something about it that kept me busy, and that I don't know. There's something about it that I enjoyed. There was a piece of it that I hadn't done before that I enjoyed, and maybe I would bash my head against the wall and hate it in a few years. But I just would like to, just like to do another show or two, I think.
Very cool. So like with the print releases and the other things that you have coming up, the new painting projects that you're going to try out, where can people find you online so they can follow these things?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is just jacubgagnonart.com. And I also post on Instagram pretty regularly, and that goes through my Facebook too. And I'm pretty sure my handle on Instagram is just Jacub Gagnon.
Awesome. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Okay. I did think about this one, and it's really hard because you have a lot of amazing artists that you've already interviewed. So my first thought actually was Sarah Jonkas. I feel like I owe her. I got to give her some props there. So she would be who I would put forward to that. And she's just a great human being. I think you'd have fun talking to her. And I did have one more that I thought of.
Okay. Go ahead.
Naoto Hattori, I think would be.
Nice.
I don't think
He's
you've interviewed
good.
him yet.
No.
He's a wonderful artist.
So much detail in such small. He manages to pack so much into his work, and there's like really small, but
they're tiny.
Like,
they're
gorgeous.
Super tiny. Yeah, they're very like gem-like and precious.
Yeah.
Really enjoy his work.
I also really love the way that he presents them as well. So the framing around the pieces always looks amazing. The whole presentation is just immaculate.
Yeah, really nice guy too.
Oh yeah, have you talked to him?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jacub, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed chatting with you too. Thanks for having me on the show.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jacub. I really liked what Jacub had to say about finding your creative voice, sort of breaking out of the constraints of your inspirations and freeing your own ideas. That's such a crucial period for an early career artist, defining what your look is and what you want to say with your work. It's not easy, but it'll ultimately define what your art even is and help distinguish your art as your own and not just a mirror or mimic of the things that you take inspiration from. It sounds like Jacub is super busy being a father for his young but also fairly substantial family. So there doesn't sound like there's going to be a new solo show on the horizon, but he will be participating in several group shows in the coming year, at the moment all at ThinkSpace, and also adding some new paintings to his web store to, test out some new ideas. And that's in addition to the various print releases he'll put out throughout the year. Be sure to follow Jacub's Instagram to keep up with all of these things and more. So thanks again to Jacub for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.